Okay, so picture this. You go out and you spend a fortune on a brand new top-of-the-line computer.
Right.
You take it out of the box, you set it up, you press the power button, and you expect the operating system to just work.
Yeah, you'd hope so. You expect it to be pre-installed, ready to go.
Usually. But then imagine a friend, maybe he's a tech support guy, he stops you and says, whoa, stop. That machine, it's basically a brick.
Oh, no.
He says, it won't run unless you download this massive external software pack, terabytes of data, patches, drivers from third-party developers. Without that, he says, you can't even log in.
This is a stressful analogy, but I can see exactly where you're going with this.
It's the perfect frame for the massive theological detective story we're walking into today. We're looking at one of the most influential texts in human history, the Quran. And the central question of this deep dive is that exact operating system debate. Is this book a standalone, fully detailed OS that runs itself?
Or does it crash without the external software of history, tradition, and scholarly interpretation?
Exactly. And we're not just talking about a minor difference of opinion here.
No, not at all. We are looking at a stack of sources that present two completely different, well, digital universes. On one side, you have the traditional view. Our source here is Yusuf Mullan. And he argues that without the external traditions, specifically the Hadith collections of Bukhari and Muslim, the system is just unusable. You can't practice the religion.
And on the other side, we've got this fascinating linguistic analysis from sources like the Quran Sleuth and a really provocative paper called The Quran versus Rituals.
And their argument.
They argue that the text is completely self-sufficient and that external software everyone keeps installing is actually, well, it's bloatware. Or maybe even worse, malware that's corrupted the original code.
So it's a battle over the source code, which means for this deep dive, we have to set a very, very strict ground rule. We are going to be rigorous about source tracking. Every time we bring up an idea, we have to ask, is this sourced directly from the kernel, the text of the Quran itself?
Or is it being outsourced to the scholars and the Hadith collections?
Exactly. We're tracking the IP address of every single claim.
I like that. Okay, let's jump right in with something that I have to admit sounded completely ridiculous to me when I first read it. The word Arabic.
It seems straightforward, doesn't it?
Right. I mean, when the Quran says it's in an Arabic tongue, we all assume it means the language from the Arabian Peninsula, the ethnic language of Arabs. That's just a fact, isn't it?
That is the standard assumption. It's what we've all grown up with. But this is where we have to open our first source, decoding the language of the Quran. And the analysis here just completely flips that on its head.
How so?
The source argues that we're looking at the word through the lens of, modern dictionaries, rather than asking how the Quran defines its own terms.
So this is that Quran-only method at work, using the text to define the text.
Precisely. The source points out that the word Araby in the text functions as a term for clarity or distinctness. Yes. It comes from a root that means to express something clearly, without any ambiguity. And to prove this, the source contrasts it with its opposite in the text, the word ajam.
Which usually means non-Arab or Persian, right? Historically, ajam is just a foreigner.
Historically, yes. But if you look at the context in the verses cited, the source argues ajam doesn't mean foreigner or, some guy from Iran.
Okay.
It means obscure, mumbled, or unclear. So the claim is that the Quran isn't boasting about its ethnicity. It's not saying, hey, I'm an Arab book for Arab people.
It's boasting about its function.
Yes. It's saying this is a clear, distinct mode of communication as opposed to one that's vague or confusing.
That is a massive shift. Because if Arabic just means the language of clarity, then suddenly the religion isn't tied to a specific geography or people. It decenters the Middle East entirely.
It does.
But wait, hold on. If Arabic isn't an ethnic label in the text, what happens to the famous tribes? What about the Quraysh?
This is where it gets really radical.
I mean, the Quraysh were the Prophet's tribe. There's History 101, the noble bloodline of Mecca. You can't just erase a whole tribe.
Unless, as the source argues, Quraysh wasn't a bloodline to begin with. The linguistic analysis here looks at the root word, QRSH.
And what does that root mean?
To gather, to consolidate, to collect resources. It's a verb.
So, Quraysh isn't a family name. It's a job description, like saying the bankers or the consolidators.
According to the source, yes. It argues that Quraysh refers to a socioeconomic class. the people who controlled the trade routes and gathered all the wealth.
Wow.
The source points to Surah 106, the chapter about them. It explicitly describes them securing trade packs, feeding people. The argument is that the text identifies them by what they do, their economic function, not by their DNA.
That sounds wildly different from the history books. And they do the same thing with the Bedouins, the Al-Arab, right?
They do. The source argues Al-Aba doesn't mean desert dwellers. It refers to people who live on the ethical periphery, those who are outsiders, to the system of law and clarity.
So, if we follow this thread, the Quran-centric argument is establishing a major baseline. Identity in the text is functional.
It's all about your actions.
Are you distinct and clear, Arabi? Are you a consolidator of wealth, Quraysh? Are you an ethical outsider, Al-Ara?
It creates a kind of meritocracy, identity based on function, not lineage.
Which sounds great, very modern. But let me play devil's advocate for a second. If the Quran is so clear and self-evident, why do we have 1,300 years of scholarship saying we need extra help to understand it?
Why does the vast majority of the Muslim world rely on that external software?
Exactly.
That is the billion-dollar question. And to answer it, we have to look at the other side of the stack. We have a source here from Yusuf Mullan titled, "Here's Why Hadith Rejectors Are Not Even Muslim."
Okay, so he is definitely not mincing words there.
No. We need to understand why he takes that stance. His argument represents the traditional consensus, and it rests on what we might call the 90-10 rule.
The 90-10 rule. Okay, let's unpack that.
Mullan argues that, yes, 90% of understanding the Quran comes from mastering the Arabic language. But he claims there's a critical 10% that requires external context.
Information you just can't get from the Quran itself.
Exactly. And for that 10%, you need the hadith. You need the user manual.
I get the appeal of a user manual. I mean, if the Quran says pray, people are naturally going to ask how, when, what do I say?
Precisely. The source mentions specific rituals. For example, he brings up the miswak, the little toothstick used for cleaning your teeth.
But too thick.
It's a very specific tradition. Mullan's argument is that the Prophet praised the use of the miswak. This is recorded in the hadith. So if you reject the hadith, you're rejecting that praise.
I see.
His logic is that by ignoring these extra Quranic instructions, you're basically calling the Prophet a liar or saying he failed to convey the full picture.
So the stakes are, if you delete the software, you delete the Prophet's example.
Right. And he brings up the prayer, the salat. The argument is basically, the Quran tells you to pray, but it doesn't give you the choreography. Without the hadith, you don't know the moves, the words, the timing.
It's like getting a computer with no keyboard driver. The OS is there, but you can't interface with it.
That is exactly how the traditional view sees it. They argue the command, obey Allah and obey the messenger, means you need a second source of authority. If the Quran is the code, the hadith are the specific drivers that make the hardware work.
But there's another layer to this traditional argument that really stood out to me. It's not just about toothsticks and prayer mats.
No.
It's about authority. It's about the miracles.
And this is a crucial distinction in our source tracking. The Yusuf Mullan source explicitly cites Bukhari and Muslim, the two most trusted hadith collections, to establish miracles that are not found in the Quran.
Okay, so we're talking about the special effects budget here.
Water gushing from the Prophet's fingers, the moon splitting in half.
And the tree stump. We have to talk about the tree stump.
The weeping date palm. Yes. The source recounts a hadith where a date palm stump apparently groaned and cried like a child because it missed the Prophet when he moved to a new pulpit.
I mean, I've had houseplants die on me, but I've never had one guilt trip me like that.
It sounds fantastical to modern ears, but we have to respect the logic of the argument here. Mullan argues these physical miracles serve as sign language from God.
I know the proof.
They're the proof of the Prophet's authority. If you reject the hadith, if you delete that external software, you lose the miracles. And if you lose the miracles, you undermine the proof that he was a true messenger.
I see. So for the traditionalist, the religion is a package deal. It's the text of the Quran plus the history plus the rituals. You can't just strip it down to the kernel.
Correct. They see the Quran-only approach as stripping the religion of its heart and its history.
Okay, so now we have to let the other side respond. We go back to the Quran sleuth and that video, the 90+10 myth exposed.
And they take a sledgehammer to this idea that the Quran needs a user manual.
How do they do it?
They do it by quoting the Quran back at the traditionalists. They cite verse 6, verse 114.
Which says,
Shall I seek a judge other than Allah when he has sent down the book fully detailed?
Fully detailed. That's a very strong phrase. It seems to directly contradict the idea that you need to go by a separate manual.
That is their entire argument. If the author of the operating system says it's fully detailed and a clarification for all things, then saying, oh, I need 10% from somewhere else is effectively contradicting the text.
Right. They argue that if the Quran didn't mention the toothstick, it's not because God forgot. It's because it's not required.
The missing drivers aren't missing. They just aren't part of the system design.
But what about the miracles? The splitting moon, the crying tree? If you stick to the source code only, do those exist?
No. The Quran-centric sources argue those are myths inserted by later generations, basically bloatware added by the users, not the developer. They point to verses where the Quran describes itself as the only miracle needed. But there is a really clever meta-argument they use regarding the word hadith itself.
Oh, this was good. This is where they use the search function on the word hadith.
Exactly. They cite Quran 39.23, where the Quran refers to itself as the best hadith, the best narrative.
The best story.
And then Quran 45.6 asks this rhetorical question, in what hadith after this will they believe?
So the text is literally asking, what other stories are you looking for besides this one? That's a pretty direct rebuttal to needing a whole separate collection of books called hadith.
And regarding obey the messenger, which is the cornerstone of Mullan's argument, the sleuth source offers a completely different definition.
Yep.
They argue that a messenger, by definition, is someone carrying a message. Think of a mail carrier.
The postman.
Right. If the postman delivers a registered letter from the king, obeying the postman means obeying the content of the letter.
Of course.
It doesn't mean you have to dress like the postman or brush your teeth like him or memorize stories about his childhood.
Right. If I start imitating the postman's walk, I'm completely missing the point of the letter.
Exactly. The source cites verses stating the messenger's duty is only clear delivery, balan ul mubin. So the argument is, he delivered the Quran. If you follow the Quran, you are obeying the messenger.
This brings us to the biggest friction point, I think. If you strip away the rituals, the prayer movements, the toothsticks, what is left? I feel like for a lot of listeners, Islam is the rituals.
Right.
If you take those away, what does the operating system actually do?
And this takes us to our source, the Quran versus rituals. This is where the whole conversation shifts from theology to sociology. The argument is that the purpose of the book isn't to create a ritualized religion.
What is it then?
It's to establish an ethical society.
They redefine some very common terms to make this point. It's like they're retranslating the menu options. Let's talk about maruf.
Okay, so in traditional jurisprudence, maruf often means customary law or sharia compliance, doing things the way the scholars say to do them.
The established way.
Right. But this source goes back to the root meaning that which is recognized. It argues maruf is universal moral logic.
Universal moral logic.
Something that is recognized as sound by reason and conscience, regardless of your religion.
So doing good isn't good because a scholar signed off on it. It's good because any reasonable person would recognize it as good.
Exactly. And its opposite, munkar. Traditionally, this is that which is forbidden by the clergy, but the source defines it as that which is rejected by reality or conscience.
So denial of the truth.
Pretty much. And then there's fasha. This one is huge. Usually when you hear this word in a religious context, people's minds immediately go to sex, adultery, promiscuity.
True. But the source argues that restricts the meaning massively. It defines fasha as excessive corruption.
So,
not just private sins.
Not at all. It includes lying, cheating, financial exploitation, creating social division.
So, think of it like this. The traditional view is kind of obsessed with jaywalking private sins, what happens in the bedroom. But this source is arguing that fasha is actually about the bank robbery happening downtown.
That is a perfect analogy. It's about systemic corruption. The argument is that by narrowing fasha to just sexual sins, religious hierarchies distract people from the bank robbery, the corruption in the marketplace, and in government.
That is a powerful critique. And this connects to how they interpret Her al-Korba, traditionally translated as relatives or kin, right?
Which leads to a sort of nepotistic charity help your family first. But the source argues korba comes from proximity. It means the near ones.
Oh, not just your cousins.
Not necessarily. It means the people who are physically or situationally near you in society, your neighbors, your community, the person standing right next to you on the subway.
So the Quran-only view presents a total shift from ritual enforcement to social responsibility. The OS isn't designed to run prayer apps. It's designed for network connectivity.
Yes. Connecting humans to humans. And this is the crux of the Quran versus rituals paper. It argues that the traditional view creates a dependency on scholars.
You need them.
You need them to tell you the rituals, to interpret that 10%. But the Quranic view, according to this source, places the burden squarely on the individual.
There's a verse they cite for this. No bearer of burden bears the burden of another.
Verse 6.164, the expert analysis in the source is that moral responsibility is non-transferable. You can't say, oh, I was just following the scholar, or I was just following the hadith. You have to use your own reason, your maruf, to determine what's right.
And there's a really provocative point they make about God being Ghani.
Free of need. This is the theological capstone. The source argues that God does not need your rituals.
He doesn't need them.
God doesn't need you to spin around a rock or starve yourself. Those rituals are traditionally framed as service to God. But if God is free of need, who benefits from good deeds?
We do. Society does.
Exactly. The source argues that good deeds, Amal Salih, are defined as actions that help humanity's social justice, environmental stewardship, truthfulness. It explicitly contrasts this with performing rituals for a deity who is already complete.
So let's just step back and look at the whole picture here.
Yeah.
We have two completely different ways of reading the same source code.
On one side, sourced to Bukhari, Muslim, and the scholars, we have a religion of structure. It's built on historical accounts, miracles that prove authority, and a detailed framework of rituals. It's that 90-10 split.
And honestly, there is a comfort in that. It tells you exactly what to do. It's a user manual for life.
It offers continuity and community, but on the other side, sourced strictly to the linguistic analysis of the text, you have a system of reason.
No miracles required other than the book itself.
No external rituals, just a relentless focus on individual accountability, social justice, and functional identity.
Where the text claims to be fully detailed and self-explanatory. It's a view that, in a way, democratizes the religion. It takes power away from the IT department of scholars and gives it back to the user.
It really forces you to ask, what is the religion? Is it the history of the people who followed the book? Or is it the content of the book itself?
And that leads to the final lingering question that arises from this whole deep dive. We talked about how the Quran-centric sources redefine identity, that Quraysh was a job description, and Arabic refers to clarity, not ethnicity.
Right. Identity is function.
So for you listening, this isn't just ancient history. It's asking a question about today. If the source code defines a believer not by their lineage and not by their adherence to historical traditions, but by their function, their commitment to truth, justice, and clarity,
then who are the actual believers right now? That's the thought that sticks with me. Are the believers the ones preserving the ancient rituals and names? Or could a believer be someone who has never even heard of the traditions, maybe never even read the book, but who actively consolidates truth and rejects corruption in their own society?
If the definition is functional, the map of who is in and who is out might look completely different than we think.
It redefines the whole network.
That is a thought that will keep you up at night. A massive thank you for decoding the source code with us today.
It was a pleasure.
We'll see you on the next deep dive.